I've never set out even to paint women. I've never set out to be a feminist. There's no doubt that I am a feminist, but I never call myself that, and I don't necessarily regard my work as feminist work. It's female work because I'm a woman. A lot of artists' work that I see is built around an obsession of some sort, and they continue to work with this theme for all of their life. And the obsession that I have that comes across in my work is mostly about the very ordinary things of love, relationships and sex. I'm not an intellectual. My work could be seen as being intellectual work by somebody looking at it, but I don't regard myself like that. I'm a much more emotional painter than that. Going to Paris to the Power Studio happened in 86, 87. I went there in November of 86, and it was one of the most revelationary periods of my life since coming out of art school. I had needed to be away from Australia to find my own bravery, if you like, and to break away from the style that I'd been growing much too accustomed to. And that was when I first screwed up a canvas. I had nothing to lose over there. Nobody was looking over my shoulder. I screwed up this canvas. I poured tea and milk and paint, anything I could find on it. And that painting became Romances in the Air, which really was the first of the Entanglement series. And when I unscrewed this thing, I mean, I'd walked all over it. I felt so free. And since then, of course, I've found a way of working which I really like, because that terrible studio way of working with on an easel and is to try and control things to the nth degree. So now I do anything that I can to sabotage that aspect of myself, because it doesn't make for good paintings. I mean, you've got to allow this intuitive and stream of consciousness and evolvement of a work, and that's what I learned in Paris. But the most important pictures for me, and what I consider to be more my typical work now, are the Entanglement series. Entanglement landscape, libido, entanglement landscape, identity, entanglement landscape, inversion. And I will probably continue to do entanglement landscape pictures, possibly as long as I live, if the obsession lasts that long. All of the entanglement landscapes are about entrapment, the traps that we can fall into through these pressures that are put on us to become something. Entanglement landscape identity is one of the most recent pictures, and it's about the assumption of roles that is often forced, particularly on young children, by their parents, by the system, by society. And it talks about the great emphasis placed on becoming something, whatever it is. I mean, it's not possible anymore to allow people to just be and evolve. There's this great pressure to become something, be it a lawyer, an architect, and I've used 4 images of Marys, if you like, and they're simply there as a device to talk about 4 possibilities that a small girl child might be influenced by in an assumption of role, and they're particularly tragic examples, and I use them as examples to avoid. I've used Mary, mother of Jesus. I've used Marilyn Monroe, Marie Antoinette, and Maria Callas, who all had very tragic lives, and I would say to young girls, do not follow their example. I'd never intended to use mattress ticking, but I'd made a very small painting as part of a miniature show that was on at the Contemporary Arts Centre at one point, and I had thought at the time that it would make a nice, bigger picture, so I bought a piece of mattress ticking because it was appropriate to the imagery, intending to use it, but upon reflection, like a lot of things, I realised that it wasn't going to work as a larger picture, so I virtually just threw the piece of mattress ticking around in my studio, and I used it as a rag. as a cover for pictures. It was hanging around probably for 5 years, and it was an incredibly dirty piece of fabric. And I'd painted this other image on one of my other pictures, and I wanted to blot off some of the paint. So I picked up this piece. It was just one of those inspirational things that you do if you allow yourself to have accidents and to explore and to be very playful, which is what I think is absolutely essential. If I stop being playful, I can't make good work. So I playfully picked up this piece of mattress ticking and laid it over this face and blotted it, and then picked it up, and my heart started beating very rapidly. It was a very good thing to have done, and I'm still exploring it. I don't know where it's going to go yet, but it just seems so appropriate to me too, because mattress ticking being what it is, a cover for mattresses, and it's just very appropriate to my subject matter, you know. I don't want personal notoriety or fame. I certainly don't want to be known for my personality, but a lot of my work is outrageous in a sense. So even though perhaps my work does that for me, it's like the picture Entanglement Landscape Libido, which has a huge masturbating woman in it. I mean, it caused quite a stir, and the whole factory threatened to go out on strike because of it. So perhaps my notoriety comes about through my work rather than my personality, which I'd prefer to happen. I think it is what will live much longer than me, is my work. I didn't expect to be successful at all. I find it more frightening the more successful you become, the more pressure there is, the more frightening it is, the more criticism you receive. But I still don't have any great desire to be more successful. For me, art is my life, and that's just it. I've worked in collectives for 14 years now, and I can't consider working in any other situation yet. I can see there might come a period in my life where it's much more convenient to have my own studio, but it's been extremely good for my career to be part of a collective. If curators from other states or overseas are going to come around, they're going to come around to the collectives. They're not going to go to people's backyards. I certainly haven't lived a normal life. I live on my own at the moment. I'm not going to have children. And I'm quite aware it's very difficult. It's difficult enough to be a female and a painter, paint female imagery and be accepted. If I had children, I'm not a very energetic person. I mean, I only have so much energy. And I know that if I had a child, that I'm also a very loyal person. I'd probably be a bloody good mother, but that's what I would become. I would become a mother, and I would stop being a painter. And I think I may never paint again, and basically I think that there's enough children in the world, and my paintings will do more for people than me having a child ever would. I don't consider them sacrifices though, because I love the life that I'm living, but I do want it to mean something, and I hope that it will.
Vytas, you've been described as one of the greatest young painters in Australia today. How do you react to that?
Depends. When you say it, it doesn't really have much effect.
No, David Dryden said it.
Yeah, but, you know, I only heard he said it, so... But it's probably true.
Well, I think it's a conspiracy. I mean, I had a huge plunge into going public when I had the residency at the university. I mean, normally I don't allow myself to sort of appear in people's little romantic stories in the newspapers and stuff. But I made a deal to talk to a reporter from the Advertiser in exchange for publicity for this show I was doing, which was my thesis, you know, accumulation of virtually 20 years' work all brought together into, you know, one of the biggest gallery spaces in the state, probably in Australia. worked on it for 3 months. But I mean, the advertiser didn't even let anybody know, you know, where I was and what I was doing while they ran, you know, this sort of 60s bloody has-been type of thing. I mean, anybody who gets sort of talked about in context of the 60s is being addressed as a has-been, aren't they? No. It's all mythology. It's all mythology. I've discovered, you know, that you don't have to actually logistically achieve a whole lot. All you have to do is to consistently do your own work and just make sure it's done, and stop asking for any, you know, free ride or rewards for doing it, you know, because you do it because you want to do it. You do it. And I'll be just happy to get the work done. I mean, I feel a certain inevitability about people taking notice of my work. I can't see how it would fail to make any impact if everybody saw it all together in chronological order, because I think that's where it's all at with my work. I've had experiences with my work that have made me feel that it's got a life of its own, and, you know, perhaps I have a duty to it if it's not that's not taken too seriously, but it is my ticket, so in that sense I have to take it seriously. So, and I do think that my perception has something to add to the general, you know, to our general cultural view, only because I see a lot of things that other people don't. The petrol sniffers was probably the best affirmation that I've had that I have a relationship with painting that it may be, you know, beyond just myself, in that when I'm trying not to paint, or when I was working as a builder for the Aborigines, I wasn't intending to paint anything at all. Then one rainy day up there, I sat down and drew a little cartoon trying to express something about... It was just a great moment the day these petrol sniffers walked back into town. I hadn't seen anybody for a week, and carrying a flag and a petrol, and great smiles across their faces. You know, I mean, I know they were stoned all the time, but it was fantastic the way somehow or other they were the ones who cut through the reality up there. You know, they sort of, you know, they'd appear in the dark, you know, great grins on their faces and everything. It was, you know, it doesn't matter what kind of a nightmare it was, you know, everyone's still smiling, you know. The thing about painting in your studio is that you've got all your tricks available to you, you know. And in a situation like that where you never expected to be doing a painting and found yourself wanting to do one and having to go and look for a piece of old tarpaulin and scrounge up, you know, crayons and paint out of the builder's container, and to go through that whole process of, you know, creating a painting out of nothing was just great. It was a good reminder, you know, of how tricks can just hold you back, and you really need to sort of throw yourself off guard all the time in order to build up your ability to respond, I suppose, rather than have a set pattern. I mean, painting's the best ticket I've got. People give me more credibility for painting than they do, you know, for anything else, probably because it's so easy to see. Ideas are very hard for people to grasp. I mean, this place, even I can barely grasp it, yet I know that it's an event that is happening, that I'm participating with the world in creating something. I mean, junkyards are such great places, always. I think there's something in a sort of a semi-scientific approach that I naturally have, and every painting is a different problem. I tend to want to paint great paintings. I feel spread pretty thin, and whenever I do anything I sort of feel impelled to be doing it for special causes, for high aims. And why do I paint the earth? Because it's a Pentagon military secret. You can't get a proper picture of it. There's some old photos. The best ones were during the Apollo missions, when the spacecraft were far out and they used long long lenses and caught the sort of sphericity of it. But most of the other pictures we've got, they date from the early 70s, and they're low-level satellite pictures with wide-angle lenses, and it's all distorted. And same old pictures every bloody time. You know, we see beautiful pictures of Jupiter and the other planets, you know, as though there was something aesthetic to be, you know, in this picture. But the Earth has never presented it to us in this way. It just seems totally inappropriate in this age, you know, for our appreciation of this planet visually as a sphere in space with all its light effects, to be such a dilapidated old thing, which is the sense I get from seeing the same old pictures over and over again in magazines. There's never any sort of hurrah, here's a beautiful new picture of the Earth, you know. Maybe NASA needs an art director or something, I don't know. I have this feeling that we're part of something incredibly old and incredibly big, and I'm looking for clues, trying to find my way, you know, my part in it. I suppose you have to be some sort of a desperado to take the chances that need to be taken, you know. But basically the most interesting subject is yourself, and I mean, it's through you that the rest of the world exists, and I mean, if your view of the world, of reality, of yourself is insatiable and deep and I mean, to me, reality has certain qualities, you know, which are irrefutable. I mean, there's the sense of the infinite. I was encouraged to paint by everybody. I mean, I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to be Walt Disney. I wanted to be Peter Pan. I don't know. I mean, I thought you could do all these things.
Nobody taught anybody performance art at art school. Performance art was basically something that you found out about from other artists, but it gives us a whole new way of looking at acting and theatre and the combinations of mediums. That's why it's interesting to me. It's a multimedia process. It accommodates an area which is now easily canned because it doesn't have an application in the commercial world. And there is no, one of its tenets is that you can't really buy or sell it. How can you own a performance? You can't. It's something that just occurs, and therefore, probably that's one of the reasons why the public might view it as a wank, because it can't be bought, it has no worth. I should probably completely contradict what I said before. I think it actually does have a place in the world. It's right under everybody's noses in the form of Madonna and other people like that. They use it all the time. It's just seen as theatre or pop, that's all. It's actually performance art. Well, the first show that I had was a performance idea which was called E, and that was all about propaganda, and E was a kind of a swastika for everything. E was everything. It was also emptiness. It was basically a small thing which could be seen to be a great thing, like propaganda is. It's a really narrow notion which can then seem to be huge.
Regular programs. Fly E-ways to new E-land. The following program is SIP.
It all terminated in a performance at the Adelaide Uni Gallery in 1985, which was basically an E-festival. and it was called New Agit Props, where the party departed to New E-land, like, you know, the Holy Land for E-believers. It was a good conclusion to that period. I mean, I was actually glad when E was over because it hung around for a long time. People got sick of it before I did. In the meantime, I also invented F, which was to try to denounce E, but I found that I was still attracted much more to E than I thought. When people want to validate a movement, they go about the process of creating its history. So they have to record its history and tell it back to everybody else as a story. So that's what I went about and did. So E, basically the last thing I ever did with E was create a 3-minute little production about its history, and it was called The History of the Great National Day.
The struggle of our past heroes who gave us the world we live in today.
There are several bodies which support, government bodies, which both state and federal, which have programs to assist artists in a number of ways, and you become eligible for these grants if you apply for something in an area of innovation. So I applied to go to Tokyo as an Australian visual artist to occupy the studio, because I wanted to make a work which looked at the notion of travelling between cultures. It became obvious that the fact that I didn't have Japanese language skills, that I was going to be a little bit ill at ease there. So, and that feeling actually continued through the whole stay, and it had really bad times and some really good times. But basically you're in a void, you can't really understand what's going on around you. So you're looking at things much more visually, much more like an innocent. But then you pick up on certain cues really quickly.
Ring me up and say, what's the name of the bank? 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 Where you do your banking?
Before Japan, my work was much more complex. It was to do with crossover grids and related structures. Since I had that experience, I became quite obsessed with just cutting almost everything out of it and reducing it to archetypal, very restricted forms. Probably more like cartoons or graphic stamps or labels or identikit photographs, or just the smallest amount of info which is going to carry the greatest weight in a way. I think for the future I'm interested in continuing to produce things which challenge me and other people in whatever form it is. I wouldn't want to lay a bet on what that is. I wouldn't really know at this stage. I think I always find the next thing as I go along. I want to be in a situation with others that I also think is, who I also think are pushing the barriers, you know, pushing the frontiers of innovation. So in some form of recognition, I think, but you know, that'll come. I'm not really hungry for it now, although I want it. I have ambition like everybody else, but it's a different type of thing. It has to be stated in a different way. You've got to get it in the right way for you. And yeah, I wouldn't like to say what I'll be doing, but I'll be doing it later, whenever that is.